How to teach a child writing skills, part 2. Okay. This part's important. Even though he's got a branch for a hand. Can you guess what part 2 is all about? Remember in the last video, we talked about the importance of knowing the purpose of our writing. Our kids need to understand, why am I putting my pencil to a piece of paper? In this video, we're talking about who. In the 3 no-nos of writing, K-N-O-W, knows, the second step is to understand who that writing is for, our audience. So it's important that when your child is picking up a pencil to write an assignment, that they clearly understand who they're writing it for. Because you and I know that if you're just writing a note in your diary, you don't have to spell, you don't have to use punctuation, you don't have to even change the word very. You can have everything be very good and very cool and very nice and very warm. You don't have to use your brain and come up with words like extremely, massively. You don't have to tweak the language if it's just for yourself. But if you're giving your paper to a teacher or to your grandpa or to your boss, you need to fine-tune your language. So in this whole in this whole realm of teaching writing skills to your kids, they need to understand why, but they need to understand who that paper is for. So if you have a student, like my son just, and I talked about this in a couple videos, he wrote some things for his technical writing class and he didn't get 100% points because he didn't use proper punctuation or grammar in some of the parts of the assignment. Super important for him to understand that his professor was expecting perfect punctuation. And so in this whole idea of who is your audience, as a homeschooler or a classroom teacher, it's important that your student understands your tuning for grading an assignment. This is so important. In the old days, they used to have this, they probably still have them as my papers go flying. I'll just hold them. They have this thing that is shaped like, oh, it's shaped like this. It's just a fork. And piano tuners would hit the fork and it would go, and then they would tune the string to that pitch. Well, your audience, your child's audience, has a tuning fork, which is going to be different than yours if they happen to be writing for someone else. So how do you model that in homeschooling? Well, you use what's called a rubric. Have you ever heard that word before? R-U-B-R-I-C. I have one for you in the descriptions. Just find it. It's rubric. A rubric is a way for you to look at a piece of writing and grade it objectively. Now, I learned about the rubric about 20 years ago. I was teaching in a co-op school, and I was partnered to teach 5th and 6th grade with an amazing classroom teacher. Oh, I learned so much about writing from her. And I was telling her I was struggling because I couldn't tell whether writing was good or bad. All I could tell was whether I liked it. And that's not a fair way to grade a piece of writing, because your child might be writing about explosions and guts and glory, and you might love butterflies and roses and Tinkerbell, right? So how do you grade something that you don't like objectively? And she said, oh, let me show you how to use a rubric. A rubric is a chart, and I didn't print one, I meant to. A rubric is a chart that breaks down the requirements for a writing assignment or a homework or a project in general. My husband works as a computer scientist for a big corporation, and they use rubrics all the time. They call them something different, but they're benchmarks or metrics that they can use to gauge whether or not they're doing a good job or a bad job. So inside the rubric, as a homeschooler, you make a chart that says, for this piece of writing, I don't care about spelling. What I care about is if you're creative, if you use adjectives, and if you have a capital letter at the beginning of every sentence and a period or a closing mark at the end of the sentence. So you have a chart, and it can be simple, or it can be like the one that I have for you down below, like a chart, making sure that you can actually see my part of the board, and my phone doesn't want to turn. It doesn't have to be fancy, but your child needs to understand this before they actually write. So it can be something like this that has, what did I say? So I want adjectives, and I'm going to give you 5 points for that. I want everything capitalized, and I'm going to give you 5 points for that. You keep forgetting your closing marks, so I'm going to give you 10 points if you close each sentence with a period. And now, when you're reading this piece of writing brilliance about a topic that you don't give a hoot about, you can look at it objectively and you can say, did they use adjectives? Yes. Do all of the sentences start with a capital letter? Yes. Do they all close with some kind of ending mark? Yes. Ooh, except that one. So I'm going to give you, instead of 10 points, I'm only going to give you 9 or whatever. A rubric is magic because it helps you take the emotion out of grading. But you can use a rubric in a sneakier way. You can give your student, your child, the rubric, and you can have them grade their paper first, where they just read. Did I use a capital letter? Yes. And they can go through and they look through. Your student, your child, will probably grade themselves harder than you will. But a rubric, a measuring tool, helps them be objective about their writing and helps you be an objective grader or judge of their writing. Does that make sense? So in this whole idea of understanding your audience, you want to give your child and yourself a way to look at their writing in a way that makes sense and that doesn't play favorites, especially if I've got 5 kids, and I can tell you that one of my kids loves things like bacteria, mitochondria, and all kinds of the andrea oleage things from science. And so I never loved some of the things that I didn't love some of the things that he chose to write about. I had another child that grips me in his writing immediately, and I fall in love with the story. And yet they're both excellent writers. Without the rubric, it would appear that I love this writer's work and I don't love this writer's work. And while at the content level, there may be truth in that, at the objective, did you do it correctly? They need to know that, and you need to know that too. So get your rubric. The last thing that I want to talk about when you're talking about writing to an audience is to remember that continual idea, that continual truth, that writing takes time. So down in the descriptions, I have something that gives an analogy of writing like making pizza. Now, in my house, pizza is love. We have pizza a lot in our house. I grew up having pizza every Friday night. And so this whole idea of pizza dough is very fresh. I can smell it. I can taste it. But one of the secret sauces of making a fantastic pizza dough is that you have to let the dough rise for an extended period of time. If you just throw the yeast in the dough and then make the pizza immediately, it doesn't taste as good as if you let that pizza dough rise and do its chemistry magic over the course of 28, even sometimes up to 48 hours, depending on the dough that you use. So in your descriptions, I have a link to how you can, these are things that are core truths that will help your students write, or your kids, write better, but through the analogy of making pizza. So I have that for you too. And it has things like know your audience. The idea here is the pre-writing for your audience is the most important step. It takes time, just like an excellent pizza dough takes time to mature and ferment is really the right word. Your writing needs to do that too. So as you're teaching your child writing skills, I'm going to remind you that you have to give them time to let the ideas marinate in their head so that the excellent writing has a time to come out. Just like a great pizza dough or a great piece of meat that's been marinated, how that flavor is just so much better than if you rush it. Writing is just like that. So grab your goodies. Make sure you grab your rubric. Make sure you grab your pizza writing thing, and I will see you in the next video. And we are going to talk about, let me just look at my notes. We're going to be talking about the number 3 in the 3 no-nos of writing is that specialized vocabulary and what a hippo has to do with that. So see you in the next video.